Handler is one of the 4/5 archetypes you can pick at the start of the game. It is the jack of all trades of the starting archetypes. They have a dog companion that can buff, heal, or even revive you in your team. Before we move on to the Handler's skills, let's talk about the dog. Upon equipping the archetype, the player will be accompanied by a German Shepherd. It'll follow you around and attack anything nearby. When attacked, it'll automatically dodge with a short cooldown. While next to your dog, it'll passively heal over time. Petting the dog while it's healing will speed up the process. If the dog's health hits 0, it'll become downed. From this point, it'll act like a downed player but without the bleed out timer. Interacting with the dog will revive it. This does not cost a relic charge. The dog has 2 types of attacks, a single bite and 2 back-to-back nips. Each bite applies a 5-second bleed dot that deals minimal damage. The dog's health scales based on difficulty. The higher your setting, the more health they'll have. The dog also has a base 50% armor damage reduction, and while it doesn't affect gameplay, the dog's kerchief color will change depending on your selected skill. The Handler's 3 skills are all AoE buffs. They also provide your dog some passive benefits corresponding with the selected option. Tapping the button will command your dog to move, attack, defend, or revive. Tapping it twice calls them back. Holding it causes your dog to howl, granting every ally within 20 meters a 20 to 25 second buff. The buff given depends on which skill you've selected. Once activated, each one goes on cooldown for 90 seconds. This howl is affected by AoE size increases and skill duration sources. Before briefly going over the Handler skills, there's a few more things I'd like to mention about the command button. As I brought up, you can command your dog to defend and even revive your allies. If you set them to guard a player, they'll revive them as soon as they go down. Be mindful of how far away you travel from them. If too much distance is put between you and your dog, it'll automatically return to you. However, like Benevolence from Medic, the distance is quite large, meaning this will only really occur in the overworld and dungeons. Guard Dog increases the Handler's companion threat generation by 15% and reduces the damage they take by 20%. Its Howl reduces the damage all players and allies receive by 15% for 20 seconds. This includes the dog as well. When it comes to drawing aggro, you're really only going to notice this happening when mobbing in the overworld, or in ad-heavy boss fights. Bosses just don't care and will prioritize players at any given point. In said ad-heavy fights, however, it can be kind of helpful. That being said, 15% DR is a bit on the small side for a buff. When compared to something like Stone Mist from Alchemist, it pales in comparison. Granted, Stone Mist is a small AoE, and the Howl is a 20 meter wide aura buff. Stone Mist does have a longer combined duration and shorter cooldown though. It's not a terrible skill, but I feel like it could be pushed up to 20%. Maybe it could also reduce ally threat generation, or give them something else like Stacks of Bulwark. Support Dog grants the Handler's dog a small AoE healing aura. It heals 0.25% of an ally's max HP per second. Howling gives all allies 2% max health regen and 25% movement speed for 25 seconds. This healing is increased by healing effectiveness sources like Triage. Unlike medic skills, however, the values are not increased on the skill itself, so only those who have said healing effectiveness sources will receive more healing. This skill is fine in my opinion. The health regen is a bit on the short side, but the movement speed bonus is really good. Because the DR from Guard Dog is so low, I honestly prefer Support Dog over it. If I could change anything about the skill, I'd make the passive healing while near the dog at least 1%. 0.25% is incredibly slow, and only really helps proccing sources like Anastasia's Inspiration. Attack Dog increases the Handler's companion damage by 20%. The Howl increases the damage of all allies by 20%. This one is the most basic, yet it's arguably the most impactful. Not for companion damage, of course. The dog deals so little damage as is. That, and being restricted to melee, makes it really hard to justify investing into it. 20% all damage to the team though is pretty nice. It's reminiscent of Song of Swords from the first game. I really don't have any complaints about this one. I think the dog's base damage could be raised significantly, making the 20% base damage increase feel more impactful. I suppose it could also be swapped out for a better bleed dot. Pack Hunter is the Handler's damage perk. It increases your ranged, melee, and skill damage by up to 30%, so long as you stay within 40 meters of your dog. It also boosts your crit chance with said sources by 5% at level 6. This range can be increased by AoE size increases like Amplitude, but you really don't need to. The range is already massive, and as previously mentioned, your dog will return to you if you get too far away. Before it was buffed to also boost melee damage, I felt like the damage perk was alright. Ranged and skill wasn't an amazing combination by any means. Now with its third damage type, I really like the perk. It's very flexible and works with a lot of builds, just like the Handler's skills. The Handler's team perk is Spirit of the Wolf. It increases your movement speed by 10%, causes all teammates within 10 meters of you to move at your speed if they're slower, and at level 7, it reduces the total stamina cost of all allies by 15%. The range is also affected by AoE size buffs. This perk is actually kind of amazing. Move speed is always good to have, unless you're running a stand-still build. Helping your team move at your own above average speed is invaluable, and it gets even better the more you invest into the stat. Your sluggish friend in Litos will be eternally grateful when you're by their side. The stamina cost reduction is also phenomenal. As I brought up in my Challenger video, total stamina cost reductions are universally great. You can sprint, evade, and charge to melee more often. Teamwork is a medic's best friend. It increases you and your dog's revive speed by 15%, which doubles to 30% at level 8. This also provides the handler and companion 50% damage reduction while reviving. And just like the team perk, this one is also very good. When combined with Revivalist and Benefactor from the medic, you revive allies nearly instantly. That 50% damage reduction boost is also kind of absurd. Let's say you're at 53.4% armor DR, which is fairly easy to reach with Fortitude on both Litos and just a little under with the other heavy sets. When you go to revive someone, you'll be at the DR cap. Combine that with the improved revive speed and you have the makings of a substitute medic. While the perk might not have the reduced stagger from Benefactor, the insane DR boost means that any attempt you make at reviving won't be punished nearly as much. The Handler's Relic perk is best friend. Whenever you use a relic, your dog's health will be fully restored. At level 9, it also grants them a 25% damage boost and 35% DR boost for 15 seconds. I hate to say it, as I really like the rest of the Handler's perks, but this one sucks. As we've established in the skill section, the dog really doesn't do a lot of damage. It also has pretty good base health regen, and occasionally auto-dodges attacks. In the overworld, dungeons, and at heavy boss fights, this has a bit more use. When your dog actually takes aggro and draws damage away from you, it can be kind of nice to top them off and increase their effectiveness. The issue lies in the fact that your dog can't reliably maintain enemy aggro, even when using guard dog. Because of the way threat generation works in Remnant, especially in boss fights, this perk ends up being dead weight most of the time. If the dog dealt more damage, had a ranged option, and could draw aggro in boss fights, this perk would be great. I honestly think it needs a rework, but if a temporary fix were to be put in place, increase the buff duration from 15 seconds to 30, hell, maybe even 1 minute. This wouldn't address the main issues with the dog, but it'd be a decent tweak for the meantime. Bonded is the Handler's Prime perk. Whenever you go down, your dog will attempt to revive you so long as you have a relic charge. When commanded to do so, your dog will even revive a downed ally. This revival is boosted by any source that increases revive speed, even the fragment. This revive brings players back with half health. It also puts Bonded on a 120, 105, and 90 second cooldown depending on archetype level. Resting at a crystal or dying resets this cooldown. Although, it's also the shortest cooldown out of any second chance mechanic. I personally find this to be way more effective than Die Hard in certain situations. The shorter cooldown means that you can use it more than once in a fight. Throw in the Handler's utility perk and you've all but got a guaranteed safe revive. You may not get the invulnerability, full heal, or badassery associated with Die Hard, but in a pinch this perk can be an absolute lifesaver, especially in hardcore mode. The Handler's archetype trait is Kinship. It reduces the friendly fire damage you deal and take by 8% per level, up to 80% when maxed. It also has the hidden benefit of reducing the health loss from Ritualist's Death Wish. Fun fact, the trait actually double dips on self-inflicted damage. If you've ever wondered why a fully charged Big Bang deals so little damage to yourself, that's why. It's a very comfy trait to have, although I kind of wish it wasn't the Handler's default one. That position, I believe, belongs to Blood Bond. I think the dog being able to absorb a portion of the damage you take would be generally better for the archetype. Both traits revolve around taking less damage in some way, but the existence of one can actually make a few builds less functional. I've shown off the trait's ability to make self-inflicted dots deal just the minimum amount of damage to proc sources like Hardcore Metal Band. With the trait fully invested, however, this isn't possible. There are a few cases where dealing less damage to yourself can hurt a setup as well. I just figured I'd point out the one that affects myself the most. It also totally has nothing to do with the fact that testing the dog's mechanics is a pain in the ass with the trait on, and I've had to use external sources to down it within a reasonable time. Besides that, the trait is fine. It allows the user to utilize explosive builds without the fear of blowing themselves or teammates up. Since the handler skills are very basic and all function nearly identically, I'll quickly go over the builds I made for each one. Besides support dog in one specific setup, they're all pretty incidental in their builds. I don't really have any tips for using them either. For guard dog, I went with a stay away build. The idea is to use your dog to draw aggro and snipe from far away with Hunter's Focus. Obviously, this will only really work in non-boss fights, but those with ads can be a better place to run it. My trinkets were Gunfire Security Lanyard, Braided Thorns, Ring of Flawed Beauty, Burden of the Departed, and Probability Cord. My weapons of choice were the Service Pistol with Hotshot and Extender, and the Huntmaster Rifle with Corrosive Rounds and Ghost Shell. My fragments were the usual: crit chance, crit damage, and weak spot damage. This setup lets you fire off a ton of shots with the Huntmaster, which is getting a huge damage boost from Ghost Shell on its third shot. With the mod up, you're basically always critting. If the dog could actually draw aggro in boss fights, this would be a very effective bossing setup. My support dog setup revolved around using the passive healing when nearby to constantly proc Anastasia's inspiration. Since I'd be so up close and personal with my dog at all times, I decided to run a melee build, Invader with Wormhole being my sub-archetype and skill. My trinkets included Abrasive Whetstone, Anastasia's inspiration, Brawler's Pride, Akari Warband, and Burden of the Gambler. I chose to run Feral Judgment with Latency as my melee and mutator. I also had Creeping Mist and Heat Wave on my two guns. My fragments were melee crit chance, melee crit damage, and melee attack speed. Quilted Heart being my relic of choice for the 20 seconds of unlimited stamina. I ended up enjoying this build far more than I anticipated. Support Dog is a great skill, allowing you to cover much more ground thanks to its 25% move speed bonus. In melee setups, move speed is even more valuable when compared to a ranged one. Since every dog bite implies bleed, I figured I'd throw an Abrasive Whetstone to get some extra crit power. For Attack Dog, I said to hell with it and made a summon-oriented build, using Summoner with Root Hollows to match. My trinkets were Soul Stone, Soul Shard, Burden of the Destroyer, Soul Guard, and Soul Link. A lot of soul in this one. Weapon choice here doesn't matter, it's what summon mods you attach to them. In my case, I chose Night Guard and Root Lash. My fragments were Skill Damage, and Mod Duration. These were the traits I ran. Rugged and Blood Bond are a necessity. I was kind of surprised by how effective the setup was. It wasn't super strong, but it did keep me alive more often than not. With more than 5 summons out at once, you heal a lot from Soul Link, get a good defensive boost from Soul Guard, and Soul Shard is always maxed out thanks to your dog and hollows. Soul Stone is pretty much the best necklace piece for pure summoner builds. The damage is nice, but the move speed bonus is what really sets it apart from the rest. It's very noticeable just how much faster your summons are when it's equipped. The Handler, like Medic, is a very safe pick when playing on Apocalypse. It's very much a jack-of-all-trades archetype. You aren't particularly amazing at anything, but you also aren't limited in your build options. Mine is pure mod setups. You have 3 skills, ranging from decent to great, that can help in a variety of situations. If ran as your prime, you can have a second chance mechanic that's potentially better than Die Hard, which on Apocalypse is invaluable. You can revive your team from a distance and speed them up significantly when they're close. It's probably the most solid archetype of the bunch. If I had to give it a rating in a tier list, I'd probably say it's in the middle. If the dog AI were better, did more damage, had a ranged option, and a better relic perk, I'd consider it a lot higher. The Handler is the middle of the road choice when it comes to archetypes. Some people don't really have an idea of what they want to do at the start of the game. Some people just see a cute dog next to their character and decide, yes, I want this one. I don't care how it performs or what builds I can make with it, I want the good boy. By the end game, it's an archetype you can throw in almost any setup. You won't be the most efficient, powerful, or even feared unit on the battlefield, but at the end of the day, as long as you have man's best friend by your side, everything will be a-okay.
A friend